So let's start with the real world consequences, because that's what I think is the most dire. Michael, when Trump was headed to the G7 summit, I did a CNN segment and they asked us about this. And essentially, what I said was he goes into that summit incredibly weak because let's remember the promise and the premise of Donald Trump during the campaign. He said, under no uncertain terms, that he would resolve the Ukraine-Russia war on day one, that he would resolve the Israel-Gaza war on day one. Obviously, he has done neither. He has been incapable of bringing home all of the hostages, and the world is more on fire today than when Donald Trump took office, which is counter to the biggest argument that he made on foreign policy, which is that he would keep America outside of the conflicts, which is that if he was president, then none of this would have happened. Well, he's president now, and we are possibly on the verge of a nuclear event on a global scale. So those are the massively dire consequences. And by the way, the reason why we are on that verge is because Donald Trump stupidly withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal back in 2018. And the whole focus of that deal, as you know well, is to keep Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Why is Israel now attacking Iran? So that they don't get a nuclear weapon. We could have done that. We were on the path to doing that in a peaceful manner. So,
but Maria, I'm so sorry, but doesn't that assume that Iran was actually, that the Ayatollah was going to live up to the nuclear agreement, right? I mean, look, we know that was bullshit, that they were secretly weaponizing nuclear fusion, as the same with North Korea and so on. Yeah, they signed these agreements, but they don't care because Iran, for as long as I have been alive, has wanted to become a nuclear power. In fact, every president in my entire lifetime, every single president in my lifetime has turned around and said the same thing. We must never allow Iran to have nuclear capability. So isn't Trump just sort of yet another president in line with the attempt to denuclearize Iran?
Yes, that is true. And I agree with you that has always been the goal. And I think ultimately what we are going to have to figure out, whoever is president, is that unless they go in and completely destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities, which, by the way, could possibly happen, right? But we don't know what other secret capabilities they might have. I think ultimately Iran is at some point going to get a nuclear weapon. But what I'm talking, but my point from earlier is that the original Iran nuclear deal was going to keep them from getting to the point where they are now. It would have taken them a lot longer to get there, like a decade or more. So at the very least, we would have been able to push this off, right, for a long time. Because to your point, it's not that we would necessarily take their word for it because they're completely untrustworthy. We know that. But there were checks and balances in place where inspectors would go in. There would be, a lot of ways in order to check what they were doing. None of that is allowed anymore. None of that has happened since we withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. So they were able to expedite their development of a nuclear weapon, and it was on the fast track. And that's why we are where we are now. So Trump now is saber rattling, which, and you know Trump better than anyone, is something that I am sure he loves to do, right? He loves to portray an image of strength and of being a badass on the global scale. But what does that do in terms of our positioning for being, the global keepers of peace, and supposedly being able to influence our allies like Israel in terms of what they're doing? Because clearly Netanyahu kind of told Trump, F you, and Netanyahu went in and, dropped all of these bombs and missiles into Iran, which again is a reason why we are in the situation that we're in.
Right. I mean, I'm not opposed to what Netanyahu has done, to be very honest with you. I think it was the right move, not just for Israel, but for the whole world. I think Iran is the Ayatollah in that regime they're just really super dangerous people. And,
no question about that.
While they talk about, Iran becoming nuclear and then obviously calling for the destruction of Israel, they've also called for the death of America. They've also now gone after Saudi Arabia. I mean, they've gone after the entire region because they are just a extremist theocracy. But this is a very interesting issue because the GOP is splintering over how deeply America should engage in this global conflict, especially right in this Middle East. Does this divide reflect a philosophical shift, or do you think it's a sign of a party that is no longer grounded in policy, but rather in personality?
I think it's a little bit of both, Michael. And again, this goes to what I started with. The reason why there is a serious rift in right-wing MAGA world is because both in 2016 and in 2020, Donald Trump ran as an isolationist. He ran criticizing every one of his opponents who, in his mind, were the reason why we were in all of these unresolvable conflicts abroad, why we were spending billions of dollars in other countries as opposed to spending that money at home. And that was a tremendously powerful message for his MAGA base, both in 2016 as well as 2020. You know this better than most because he did this even at the beginning of 2010 during the, or even before that, during the election of in 2008, because I remember him criticizing every Democrat who voted for the Iraq War when, of course, this was happening. He didn't have a vote, but we all know he supported the Iraq War and he lied about it, right? That's who he is. But the philosophy for Donald Trump in 2016 and in 2020 was an isolationist philosophy, which does go counter to the roots of the the traditional conservative Republican Party, right? And so I think all of that now is starting to be reflected in all of the tension that is now existing within the current GOP, which includes an isolationist MAGA base that voted for Trump because of what he promised, both in 2016 and in 2020, which was to not just get us out of the current conflicts, but to not get us into any additional serious conflicts.
Sure. It's now everywhere. So obviously, Russia, Ukraine is still active. Israel, Hamas is still active. We have an issue between Pakistan and India.
That's right.
Which is still going on. We still have not gotten the hostages back. On top of that, now you have Israel with Iran. I mean, there's a lot of conflict that's going on. But that brings me to, I really did, despite I can't stand either of them. I watched Ted Cruz on Tucker Carlson.
I knew you were going to go there.
Sure. All right. I mean, you're talking about two individuals who used to speak in unison. And I watched as Tucker Carlson shredded Ted Cruz to pieces with his, I think he's Harvard educated or whatever it might be. I know Ted Cruz is Ivy League educated. Made him look like an idiot, like a complete and total fucking idiot who knew nothing about Iran other than taking a very strong stance. Not that I disagree with the stance, but Tucker Carlson had a point. And I hate to say that because I think Tucker Carlson is just a fucking asshole, right? But I take that as just one of many examples. And with that, I wanted to ask you, are we witnessing the collapse of a unifying foreign policy doctrine in the Republican Party? Because these were two guys that literally spoke identical phrases. And what does it mean for global stability when one of our two major parties, our only two parties, can no longer speak with a single voice?
I think it's really concerning, Michael. And, one of the things that we can look at is, again, this sort of evolution and then devolution of where the Republican Party writ large is on this. And what this tells me is that what Donald Trump was able to do in 2016, 2020, 2024, is paper over the massive tensions that completely existed but weren't as obvious because we were not really in a situation where they could come to the fore the way that they are now. So what I mean by that is that Donald Trump very easily took advantage of what he knew was going to be a stance that was going to be very popular with the MAGA base by acting as an isolationist, by talking about how America should focus at home, America should not be involved in any foreign wars. That's not our fight. We shouldn't care about that, which we all know goes counter to, again, Republican conservative policy, traditional, as well as what we know should be the role, at least in my opinion, of the United States in the world, which is that of a key ally in the democratic sort of, Western ideology, and protecting that as much as you can. Now, what has happened since then is that you now have the traditional Republican conservative ideologists like Ted Cruz going up against what has become a very powerful isolationist MAGA-based ideology in the likes of Tucker Carlson and in the likes of Trump's majority MAGA base, and they don't like this.
Sure. So let's take them as an example. The Tucker Carlsons, the MAGA base, the isolationists, and so on.
Steve Bannon.
The Steve Bannons. They have to understand. I mean, they must understand that a nuclearized Iran is not, forget about whether it's a danger to Israel or not. It's mutually assured destruction. I mean, don't forget, Israel's capabilities far exceed that of Iran. So if Iran became nuclear, so what? Doesn't make a difference. It would be mutually assured destruction. But do they not understand that we share the same air on this planet? That what takes place in the Middle East, sure, you're not going to feel it for 36 hours, but 36 hours, that air circulates through the globe and right here into the good old US of A, that it also will poison the food supply. People will become sick. We have only one Earth for all of us to live on. Nuclear is a freaking disaster. It's why when the Fukushima nuclear reactor, right, started to leak, the entire world's nuclear programs went running over there in order to ensure that it didn't end up leaking into the waterways and to poisoning, right, the earth. I mean, I don't understand why they think that this far extremist Islamic ideology, and it's not Islam, it is not, right, the Quran. It is their, it is their warped, it's their warped extremist use of the Quran in order to act in a manner which is inconsistent with the 21st century, right? And, it's a theocracy that puts you in a better place if you are dead than if you are alive. It is relatively impossible to beat a theocracy that says, you know what, this is the holding place for your soul right here, right today, current on earth. It's just a holding place. You die as a martyr, you're going to a much better place with your 72 virgins, as if that's some sort of, as if who the fuck wants that? I have no idea. But with 72 virgins and you're living in paradise and so on. So, this has been brainwashed to them. This is the part that I am so concerned. And I don't even want to talk about Republicans being divided. I'm talking about Democrats as well who are divided on the same issue. It's, to me, should be one voice and not just America. I'm talking about the whole world. Again, because what takes place between Israel and Iran at this very juncture affects everybody in the world.
No doubt, Michael. And I completely agree with you. This isn't right now a Republican versus Democratic issue, and it shouldn't be, right? Because This is existential for all of us as a global community. To your point, Iran having a nuclear capability is something that puts the whole world in danger. Now, where I think Democrats are, and I think that they are sober in this, is that right now they have been completely locked out of any kind of briefings, information, what's going on, what is the reality, what's happening on the ground, what have Trump's conversations been with Israel and Netanyahu, what have his conversations been with Russia, right? What are they prepared to do or not do, since they're, allies with Iran, if you will. So what Democrats have been saying, and I think this is a smart positioning, is that they're not saying, no, Donald Trump, we cannot go in and bomb Iran, we can't get involved. That's not what they're saying. What they're saying is that if there really is the possibility for the United States to go in and help Israel with their what do they call that bomb? The
Moab. It's the Moab.
Yes, exactly.
It's the bunker buster.
The
Moab.
bunker buster.
Right.
Exactly.
But it's what's referred to. Moab is sort of the acronym for mother of all bombs.
Right.
It's the bunker buster. They come two at a time. So one smashes a hole into the ground deep, like 50 plus feet, and the second one, which is laser targeted to the same spot, just opens it up to hundreds of feet underneath.
Then destroys anything that's in there, right? So if we were to go in and do that, that is an aggressive war event, right? So according to the Constitution, Congress should be the one giving the president the authority to do that. And that way we are all on the same page. We are speaking with one voice. That's what Democrats are asking for. They are asking for this administration to go up to Congress to brief them, as they should, both Republicans and Democrats, what the situation is, what the dire nature of it is, what is the possibility of the United States going in and partnering with Israel to do this, what is the classified information that we have, what do our intelligence services say, what is the probability of success, what is the danger, how can it go awry?
Yeah, a full strategy, a full wartime strategy.
Together, in a bipartisan way. And then they can come out of that to say, this is where the United States stands, Israel and Iran, right? We are going to help Israel keep you from getting a bomb. And maybe that will even push Iran to say, okay, I'm going to give up my nuclear capability, right? I doubt it. But again, going in there with a unified voice, to me, is a no-brainer. Like, why wouldn't Trump want that?
But he does want it. That's the whole thing. He does, it's not really fair. And I am not bending the knee, but I want to be fair. It's important to my listeners. It's important to America. All right. The problem is there's such a fucking divide. There's such a divide between Republicans and Democrats that they cannot even sit at a table to discuss something as important as a nuclearized Iran, which places not just America, but the entire world in jeopardy. The fact that we are so divided, where Trump and his administration, they don't feel that they're going to get any cooperation even on this issue, right? So they shut out the Democrats. The Democrats, right, have their own reasoning for why they want to get information, sit down at the table so that they could blast the president on something, right? And this is the back and forth. And as an American, as somebody who has about 200 family members that live in Israel, as somebody who is a taxpayer in this country, I can't stand our politicians. It is not their job to play political party politics when you're talking about something as existential. They forget that they work for us, right? They are all looking for their 15 minutes or their 5-minute clips they could send to all of their constituents to stuff their fucking coffers, right, for their next political campaign. And I say, I don't give a shit about them. Their job is to make sure that not just America is safe, but the whole world is safe. All right, including many Americans who are living right now in Israel.
Yeah.
Right. There are thousands and thousands of Americans who are, they have dual citizenship.
They have to be terrified right now, Michael.
Yeah.
And,
they should be.
And I think understandably so. But to your point, I actually think Donald Trump has a golden opportunity here. Because if he were to be seen as going to the Hill and inviting the Democrats and inviting the Republicans to a bipartisan classified briefing and strategy session, then it's on the Democrats to accept it and say, yes, we will work with you, Mr. President. This is an existential threat for us and for our global community. Let's do this. It puts them, the Democrats, then in a position to have to accept that. Or if not, then they are seen as the ones who are playing politics with this. So
they're playing politics with our lives, with the existence of the planet.
Yet, Michael, Trump has not done that. He has not offered this briefing the Democrats are asking for, and I think he should, because, like I said, I think this is a golden opportunity for him.
So do I.
I hope that he takes it. I hope that he kind of tries to take off all of the political back and forth, and look at this as an opportunity for him to really show if he has any, anything in him to talk about how he wants to do this for the good of the country and the good of the global community. I think he could do this. As you and I know, what then screws things up, even if he has any kind of good intention, is when people start whispering in his ear, no, you shouldn't do this because of this. No, you shouldn't do this because of that.
Yeah, he has terrible enablers that are around him, and we all know the names of a handful of them, but I suspect that there's even more. But how I know that what we're saying right now is accurate about the divisiveness and the animus that a sitting member who's Republican has towards a sitting member of the Democratic Party and vice versa is just look, for example, at the detainment of Senator Alex Padilla. It's not just alarming, it's unprecedented.
It's unprecedented. It's terrifying.
Terrifying. Do you see this as a political warning shot? And if so, how do we protect democratic norms from being weaponized in this way?
That's such a good question, Michael, because I do think that what happened to Senator Padilla and what has happened to the mayors and what happened to the judge and what happened to, I think recently, the New York Attorney General, this is, like you said, not just unprecedented, but it's alarming and it should be terrifying. Because if the administration and law enforcement agencies under Donald Trump's control can do that to those elected officials, imagine what they can do to normal everyday citizens. And frankly,
hello,
doing
right. Hello. Yes. I'm sitting watching television with my lawyer when we went to go sign when we were asked to sign a counterfeit federal location monitor agreement when three of the biggest human beings I've ever seen in my life, Mr. Cohen, stand up and face the wall. Right? I understand what Alex Padilla...
You've lived this.
I sure have. I didn't live it the way Alex Padilla did, where they put him on the floor, they brought him downstairs, and then they let him out. They put me in a fucking freezer, in a freezer cell for 3 hours, shipped me up for another 16 days, making it 51 days of solitary confinement. The first 2.5 days, no food at all. I know what it's like to be abused by the system, which sort of raises the follow-up question I wanted to ask you. What do we do when they start treating, individuals like this? These are public servants, to your point. I was just a critic, right? So, imagine they can do this to public servants. Yeah, exactly. Imagine what they can do to you.
That's exactly right. I think what we need to do, Michael, is talk about this nonstop, mobilize around it nonstop. We saw what that can do as a flash in the pan on Saturday. We saw millions of people going out and protesting for, No King's Day, while at the same time Donald Trump had his lame military parade. But what I will say is that's not enough. We have to continue to talk about this every day we have to continue to mobilize everyday Americans to get them to raise their voice and to act on this, because the only way that we fix this, Michael, is by getting Republicans who have enabled this kind of behavior from Donald Trump out of office in 2026, and then ultimately get, whether it's Donald Trump and he's going to try to run again, or J.D. Vance if he's the candidate, or whoever else is the candidate, make sure that we defeat them in 2028. And I think that is a tremendous challenge for us, because there's a long time between now and next year's congressional elections, midterm elections, and definitely a long time between now and 2028. But I do think that what is right now playing in our favor is that Americans, everyday Americans, are starting to realize that what Democrats were saying would happen in a second Donald Trump term was not exaggeration. It was not just a talking point. It is actually coming to fruition in the scariest, most terrifying ways imaginable. And that is something that we're going to have to keep up every single day and highlight every single thing that happens and put it in that rubric about how Donald Trump and his administration and the federal agencies that are under his control, he is weaponizing them and going after American citizens. And if they can do that to a Michael Cohen, to a Senator Padilla, to these mayors, to a judge, to the New York Attorney General, imagine what they can do to you. And that is something, I think that is a message that is resonating. We are seeing Donald Trump's polls collapsing around us on every issue, the economy, immigration, his overall approval rating. So it's going to take a lot of energy on our part and a lot of making sure that we communicate the message in the places where we were absent in 2024, making sure that we talk to the communities and the voters that we missed in 2024. And let them know how important this is for the lives and livelihoods of their families and their communities.
So, it's funny that you brought up the distinction between the parade, the military parade, and, of course, the No Kings protests. I did a massive Substack on it, and I issue a warning to all of my subscribers on my Substack. And I want people to hear me, right? We get great numbers here on Mea Culpa, too. So I want everybody to hear me loud and clear. First of all, I wasn't happy. I was not happy that the parade was so lackluster. Now, I don't care that it was in conjunction with his birthday. I truly don't. It's the 250th anniversary of our army. And out of respect to them and the sacrifices over 250 years, I would have loved to have seen something big and grand. And so it's not what turned out.